Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
You don't notice a wall failing all at once. First its hairline cracks. Harmless, decorative. You tell yourself they've always been there. My name is Jonah. I'm an architect in a small New England city that's never sure if it wants to be Boston when it grows up or if it's happier staying a postcard. My wife, Mara, is a city auditor. We met arguing about a setback variance in a committee meeting, me defending a cantilever like it was a puppy. Her quoting municipal code with the calm of a surgeon who doesn't mind if you keep talking while she saves your life. For 8 years, our marriage felt like clean lines and good light. Weeknights with glassware clinking, shared to-do lists, a couch that knew the contours of our knees. We weren't exciting, but we were kind. Or I thought we were. The first crack was her laugh, not the soft one that lived inside our house, the gentle breath she gave to dumb sitcoms and my worst puns. This laugh was different. It arrived from behind a bathroom door or through the breezeway at night when she stepped outside to get air. It had edges. It sounded like it belonged to a version of her I'd never been introduced to. Then came the phone. Mara used to treat her phone like a toaster. It lived on the counter because that's where it lives. Suddenly it was an organ. She carried it from room to room. Face down. Do not disturb. A new passcode she didn't say out loud and I didn't ask for. When it vibrated, her eyes cut toward it like a reflex. She was trying to unlearn. Little things, always little things. A smudge of lipstick on a Tuesday she called all meetings, 0 clients. A new blouse with the tag stuffed deep into the kitchen trash under coffee grounds. A ride-share receipt at 11:18 p.m. Dropping her 4 blocks from a wine bar where we used to go when we were poor and tried to look like we weren't. Work, she said when I asked about the late nights. Year-end reconciliations. People panic if you don't email them back by midnight. Mara wasn't a liar by nature. She was worse, a good storyteller who believed truth is a sequence problem. Shuffle the order and most things feel reasonable. I designed buildings. She designed narratives. We were both drawing lines the other person couldn't see. Here is where I admit something. I talk about hairline cracks like I'm the careful observer who detects them. But I missed them for a while because I wanted to. We were in a good month. A developer I'd been courting gave us a green light on the Hay Street Library renovation, my first public commission, with my name on the lobby plaque. It would be a career hinge. A legacy hinge if I didn't screw it up. So I ignored the laugh. I ignored the phone. I ignored the scent of a woodsy cologne on her scarf that didn't match any friend he'd ever met. And then I found the receipt, folded to the size of a thumbnail, lodged in the dryer lint trap. A trattoria downtown that staggers their 2 tops close enough you learn how a stranger fights. 2 entrees, a bottle of Super Tuscan, a dessert we joke about sharing and never do. The date was a Thursday. Shed called Vendor Calls Until 9. The signature was hers. I sat at the kitchen island with that slip of paper burning a hole through my palm. I googled the wine because that's the kind of idiot I am. It was a bottle I'd shown her on Instagram once when we couldn't justify it. Shed replied with a laughing emoji and the word someday. Apparently someday had found a calendar. I didn't confront her. Confrontation is a shape. A fight you can win or lose. I needed something else. I needed clarity like a square of glass held up to the sun. So I started a folder on my laptop. Innocuous name, punch list. Inside it, a note called ledger. I don't recommend keeping a ledger of a person you love, unless you're okay learning you love an outline, not a person. The first entries were boring. Friday, smell of cedar. Showered again at 10:40 p.m. Monday, phone vibrates, 1:11 a.m. She face down smiles, types, sleeps on side away from me. Then small bolder strokes. Uber 11:18 p.m. Dock Square. Yoga mat in trunk, untouched dust. Calendar invite. Council prep 8 hours 9 minutes. And 0 seconds. She leaves at 6:30. The thing about evidence is it makes you calm or crazy. It made me calm. The lost air in my lungs returned. My hands trembling around the receipt steadied. I wasn't gut feeling myself into paranoia. I was collecting. The night the crack became a fracture was parked across from the same trattoria, pretending to text watching the reflection in a plate glass window to stores down. It was 8:02, and my breath hung like a speech bubble. She arrived wearing the black coat with the belt she only brought out for conferences. She touched her hair 3 times before she opened the door. At 8:09, he walked up. He didn't have a villain's face. Clean, normal, the type Boston breeds in navy suits and good dentistry. He kissed her in that way, where you have to test if a kiss is still allowed, and, when it is, you take more. She laughed the private laugh and they sat. I took her photos because I didn't trust memory to hold still. When she got home, she stood in the mudroom and texted someone for a long time before taking off her boots. 3 dots loud as a siren in the reflection of the storm door. She walked into the kitchen. She was entering a movie halfway through and kissed my cheek, the way someone keeps a place in line. Long day? I asked. She nodded. We found $1 million that was hiding. Where? She smiled. In the numbers. I made a noise like I understood auditing and put the receipt back in my pocket, where it burned less than the wine list. That should have been the moment I staged a fight. Instead, I did something worse. I leaned into it. The next week, when she said vendor dinner, I said don't wait up. I made sure she saw me not looking, and she made sure I saw her not hiding. That's when I realized the scariest thing of all. It wasn't just betrayal. It felt like choreography. You don't choreograph for yourself. You choreograph when you want an audience. And there I was, front row, pretending I didn't buy the ticket. I'm not a detective. But architects do think like cops in one respect. You learn to see where loads transfer. Nothing floats. Every beam rests on something. And if it doesn't, it's lying. So I traced the loads. Her council prep mornings began earlier. The new route to City Hall added miles to the odometer. She took conference calls on mute in the garage, with the door half open for air. Which is how you describe privacy, when you don't want to call it that. She bought new perfume, and hid the old bottle like a relic you don't want to explain. It wasn't just an affair, it was an ecosystem. You don't build ecosystems by accident. The man from the trattoria showed up again, where he shouldn't have. A coffee shop near our house, at 7:10 a.m. On a Saturday, she said she was meeting a contractor. He had weekend stubble like a man who wants to look like he's not in a weekend suit. They didn't touch. They sat side by side at a window stall, shared a laptop hers, and laughed at something I hope wasn't me. Ledger grew. Screenshots I told myself I'd never need. Credit card charges I noted and didn't question out loud. To hotel keys that weren't ours in the pocket of a raincoat she stopped wearing after I folded it to hang correctly. I built a case. That made me feel sane. Except the edges didn't line up. I found a text on her iPad after an update logged her back in without her new password. Can't call now. Hayes home. Then, stop. Later. It was click enough to be real, but on the nose in a way real people don't text. Another thread from a contact saved as I read like an outline. If he asks, I'll say we were at the North Annex. He won't check. It wasn't sexy. It was procedural. When I searched our joint account, the charges sang in harmony. Dinners, lifts, a florist he'd never heard of. But the dates created a problem. One of the longest nights out was the same night we went to her sister's to watch The Bachelor and argue about whether a 24-year-old can love anyone. The timestamp said she'd closed a bar tab at 10:58 p.m. downtown. At 10:58, we were eating sheet cake in her sister's kitchen. Mara passing me the frosting roses because she knows I like the corner. I went back through my photos to be sure. There we were. My stupid frosting blue mouth. Her mid-eye roll. The timestamp baked into the live photo. If she was building a second life, she'd outsourced it to a calendar app with a bug. But the weirdest inconsistency was smell. Sometimes the cedar cologne on her scarf punched me in the throat, climbing my sinuses like ivy. 2 days later, nothing. Not a ghost. Either this man bathed in a cedar grove every time, or she was adding it. I told myself I was overthinking and then remembered I build structures that keep kids safe in reading rooms. Overthinking is the tax for sleeping at night. There's a moment in any project when you realize the drawing you've been refining is actually a draft of a different building. The case I thought I was building a straightforward affair kept morphing into something else. The hotel receipts sometimes had 2 dinners charged to the room, but only 1 guest registered. The lift charge I expected at 11:18 p.m. on a Thursday appeared on a Wednesday at noon. The calendar events moved. Meanwhile, my Hayes Street Library job asked for a timing recalibration. The developer's lawyer called and asked for a few comfort clarifications about invoices already approved. I gave them. You always do. And then the city emailed to say that because of internal staffing constraints, our approval meeting would be pushed. I mentioned this to Mara in the kitchen. Staffing constraints, I said, reading the email out loud, because that's how you wish a sentence into changing. She nodded, too fast. We're short. Everyone is covering 2 chairs right now. Is that why you're working nights? She held my gaze just long enough to be brave. It's just a season. Seasons end. This felt like a climate. The second phone showed up in a basket of clean towels, like a baby in a test of character. I don't know if I failed by picking it up or by putting it back, but I did both in the same minute. A banner came in while I held it. Unknown. Is he catching on? My jaw clenched and the rest of me tried to be Switzerland. On a Thursday, we callously named pasta night. She came home with a paper bag from the good place, the one that gels the sauce like an admission of guilt. We ate at the island, and she told me about an it vendor who couldn't stop talking about his dog. When I stood to rinse plates, she touched my wrist. You good? She asked. I said yes, because men like me say yes even when the fire exits are blocked. Audit stress people, she said. It's never personal. I thought numbers were the least personal thing. She smiled, and for 1/2 second I saw the Mara who moved seats at our wedding, so my mother wouldn't be stuck with the vocal ant. Numbers are where the personal hides. The next morning, a heavy envelope arrived from a law office I'd only seen on brass plaques in buildings I couldn't afford to rent. It wasn't addressed to me but was addressed to my firm. Inside, a request for records related to the library project. It took my brain a minute to find the sentence that mattered. Notice of investigation, city, procurement, misallocation of funds, or the suggestion thereof. I read the paragraph 3 times, and each time the words cooperate and criminal slid closer together. I put the letter on my desk and stared until the paper felt like a dare. That night, Mara didn't come home until 11:40. She smelled like outside and a conversation she didn't want to repeat. I showed her the letter. Oh, she said. And that single syllable was all regret and already knowing. I wanted to tell you when I could. You're auditing the library, I said, suddenly certain. I'm auditing procurement, she said. Which is auditor, for I can't answer the question you were brave enough to ask. And you're working late to what? Find my signature on something it shouldn't be. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the part of her that used to choose kindness tightened its ponytail. I'm trying to keep the rot from touching you. An affair would have been easier to punch. Who is he? I asked, because I needed the small frame if I couldn't grip the big one. She looked past me to a point on the wall where we'd once measured years with pencil marks and washed them off when we finally admitted we weren't going to be that kind of family. Someone who can help, she said. Someone you don't want to meet. That's when the case I thought I was building, the one with restaurant receipts and 2 neat lies, collapsed to reveal a different load path. This wasn't jealousy, it was jurisdiction, and I had a sick feeling I was both witness and exhibit. If you've ever sat through a zoning hearing, you know the shape of dread that pretends to be patience. The 3rd week of letters and calendar rescopes. That's what I lived inside. The library team stopped answering me with sentences. Their lawyer did. When a lawyer turns nouns into verbs, you start measuring your life in stamps. I convinced myself Mara's late nights had a noble purpose. She was cleaning the city's mess before it reached me. That belief lasted 48 hours. Then another envelope arrived, this one personal. My name in a staggering font that makes your hands sweat. A formal request for a voluntary interview to clarify possible conflicts of interest related to municipal billing on a Hayes Street library. Voluntary interviews don't feel voluntary when the return address is a seal. I put the letter on the counter and watched our kitchen go stranger. The light that usually softens at 6 p.m. seemed to interrogate. The clock above the pantry groaned louder. There's a physics to panic. Time thickens. Doors lean away from you. That night, I drove. Not anywhere righteous. The city. The bridge that isn't special, but acts like it is when Fog shows up for photos. I parked near the trattoria and waited for people who look like us to perform us. At 8:11, Mara walked in. Alone. At 8:19, the man appeared. Clean suit. Not navy this time. Charcoal. He didn't kiss her. He shook her hand. They sat perpendicular at a table meant for diners who want to be seen by people who don't deserve to watch. He slid a folder across the table. She slid a flash drive across back. They didn't laugh. They didn't touch. They were a transaction. I took a photo because that is what I had trained my hands to do instead of shaking. When she got home, I tried a scripted rehearsed for different reasons. I know, I said. She set her keys down, like she was placing a tiny dangerous animal onto a counter. What do you know? That you're not cheating on me. The words surprised us both with how little relief they delivered. You're feeding someone. Someone with a badge. Mara didn't pretend. Hayes with the US Attorney's Office, she said. Hayes not my choice for coffee companion. Why didn't you tell me? The question felt smaller than my mouth. Because you're an architect who prides himself on bidding clean. She pointed at the letter on the counter like it was a dog that chews shoes. And now my office has to figure out why your invoices move like a shell game. I wanted to be offended enough to do something cinematic. Instead I felt tired. I didn't move anything, I said. And it was the truest sentence I had in the building. Mara took a slow breath, slow enough that I thought she might leave the room and not come back as a person I recognized. Jonah, she said. Someone moved them. The dumb part of my brain stubborn, loyal clung to the smaller story because it was easier to solve. So the trattoria was a meeting. I tried to inject casual into a word that belongs to espionage documentaries. The hotel keys. The cologne. The key cards were from a vendor site visit. She smiled without humor. The cologne was for you. Me. She touched her scarf. I needed you to think the worst of me. She didn't blink. Because if you thought I was with someone else, you wouldn't look where the real thing was happening. You'd look at me. Hiding in plain sight, I said. Because saying the click made me feel like I understood it. I wanted you safe, she said. And I wanted you angry at me so you wouldn't walk into a meeting and run your mouth at the wrong person. Something inside me howled to defend her. Something else wanted to list the receipts that didn't align, the messages that read like stage directions, the way she taught me to be suspicious of everything except the right thing. But a third thing quieter, closer to bone whispered that my life wasn't being dismantled by a jealous imagination, it was being refactored by a system. What system? I asked. The one that rebuilds libraries with money that doesn't want to be a library, she said. We had a conversation then that was a war in truce's clothing. I learned words like clawback and consent decree, and that the city had a habit of growing new pockets that could hold money under review until it forgot why it was under review. I learned that a consulting firm whose name I had repeated lovingly at donor lunches could conjure value engineering into we built 3 elevators where to will do, and that if invoices are warped, money acquires amnesia. I learned that my name had appeared on a routing sheet that technically didn't require my signature, but benefited from the glow of it. You think I did this? I said, more statement than question because my voice didn't trust a question. I think people who know your name did, she said. And if love has a flavor, it tasted like rust in that sentence. I wanted to ask her why she didn't trust me so badly she built a decoy affair to keep me busy. But her eyes looked like a person who had 100 conversations with 100 men who looked like the one at the trattoria and survived those conversations only by going quiet inside. Why the second phone? I asked instead. It felt petty and huge. So nobody subpoenas my mother's photos of your birthday cake, she said. So if my office gets compromised, my contact doesn't live in our family plan. And the text. Is he catching on? She held my gaze long enough to flatten me. That was about the person who walks your invoices, she said. Not you. I let the ledger exist a minute longer inside the lie I'd built to store it. Then I dragged it to the trash and watched the progress bar crawl like an insult. "Are we okay?" I asked, because idiocy has a tone of voice, and today it was mine. Mara didn't answer. She picked up the letter addressed to me and tapped it against the counter. "Be smart," she said. "Don't talk to anyone without counsel. The kind that doesn't do real estate closings for your buddies. You'll be there." It left my mouth smaller than I am. "I can't be," she said. "Conflict." She smiled, a shape that doesn't exist in any emoji. "That's how you know him still on your side." At 12 a.m., I woke to the sound of her in the bathroom, not laughing, crying, the kind of cry meant to be absorbed by tile. I didn't go to the door. I lay there and counted to a number I hoped counted for something. In the morning, she made coffee and stirred mine with the spoon I prefer. That's the thing about betrayal, but isn't betrayal. Your body keeps the rituals, because the ritual is what kept you alive. The U.S. Attorney's office lives in a building that looks like it was designed to make you regret open-toed shoes. Security is the kind that politely removes your belt and your illusions. My attorney, a man whose cufflinks could deflect shrapnel, told me to answer only what was asked. The room had no art. They didn't accuse me of anything. They asked questions while I wandered my own life with a flashlight. How did the firm choose the consultant? Who introduced you to the developer? Why did the phasing change after the cost escalation memo? Did you benefit? I said no so many times I tried the word in different accents to keep it interesting. When we were done, my attorney's hand on my shoulder was firm in the way men touch men to spare them a hug. Outside, the day was the kind Boston does well, honest, cold, not trying to make you feel better. I walked 3 blocks and didn't call Mara because I was still mad at her for the version of her he'd made up. Then I called anyway. "Are you safe?" she asked. "From what?" "From you," she said. "From what this makes you think you are." I said no to every question, I said. "I am a well of no." "Good," she said. "That's the shape of the truth." That night I didn't go home. Not because I was avoiding her, because the envelope my firm received, the interview, the way the developer's lawyer used my first name and Alish together, they formed a shape I couldn't sit inside yet. I walked the neighborhood we used to walk when we first moved here, and every building felt like a criticism of how I use space. Around midnight I went to the office, opened the project folder, and searched for a thing I didn't want to find. There it was. A routing sheet with my name typed above a line I never signed. A change order that looked like a change order if you weren't a person who knows that steel doesn't cost 20% more in 1 week because it misses someone. A note in the margin of a PDF with a joke only one person I know would write. The person who introduced me to the developer. The person I asked to handle the boring stuff because I wanted to be free to draw. The person I took to coffee when he was a sophomore intern because he showed up in a real shirt when everyone else wore hoodies. My project manager, Theo. A truth about betrayal. The peripheral vision hurts worse. Your marriage can fracture and, if you fed it well, there's enough protein to regrow. But when a person you mentored walks a signature into a place it's not allowed to live, something more primitive tears. I called him. He answered like a man who never expected to hear from a number after midnight that wasn't a delivery app. "We're going to fix it," he said before I asked the question. "That's how you know there's no fix." "Why?" I said. "Because they made it easy," he said. "Because the consultant said, this is how you secure the next contract. Because you don't say no to money that shows up in the shape of a project you want." Did I benefit? I asked, needing the small truth inside the big disaster. "You got the building," he said, not understanding the difference between a plaque and a kickback. I wanted to blow up. Instead I hung up, printed the sheet, and drove home. Mara was awake because people who pull thread in the dark sleep like birds. "It wasn't you," I said, and it came out like forgiveness accidentally got into the sentence. "It was Theo." She nodded once. "I know. You know. I have a badge who shows me things I don't ask to see," she said. "Jonah, they came for you because your name can carry theirs. That's the grift. Good men make great cover." I leaned against the counter We measured everything against and felt knees I trust every day consider quitting. I kept a ledger on you, I said. I filed you like a case. I know, she said again. You made it easy. I frowned. I made. Mara looked at me like a person who loves me enough to be cruel once. The day I met the U.S. attorney's guy. He told me you would not believe a procurement case if it arrived naked on your desk. He said you'd think in rooms, not in corridors. So I had to build you a room. The affair, I said. Naming a ghost like a neighbor. The performance, she corrected. I needed you angry at me, not righteous at a system that eats righteous men for breakfast. It should have enraged me. It did and didn't. It sat in my mouth like a pill you know will help if you can convince yourself to swallow it. That was the second bottom. The first, there was no affair. The second, she used the shape of one to keep me alive inside a city that would use my name to salt the earth. What happens now? I asked. Now you tell the truth, she said, and you stop carrying men who looked up to you as a reason to look down. I still don't forgive you, I said, because if honesty is a habit, I wanted practice. You don't have to, she said. You just have to answer the phone when it rings and not lie. The phone rang 2 days later. Theo's number first, then the developer's. Then a reporter, whose voice tried to make me forget she was recording. I didn't answer any of those. I answered my attorney, who used verbs like outrun and absorb. I answered the U.S. attorney, voluntary again. And this time I brought the page with my name, above a line I didn't sign. I answered my own stomach, which asked for food for the first time in a week. When the story broke, the headline didn't include my name. It included my firms. It included consulting in quotation marks and diverted without them. It included internal whistleblowers and auditor cooperation and a blurry photo of City Hall that looked like a watercolor someone left in the rain. We ate takeout on the couch with the sound off and the captions on. You can hate me for the method, Mara said, but not for the math. I laughed, which felt like borrowing an organ. You wall cedar. She grinned. I wanted you to roll your eyes so hard you didn't roll through an interview without counsel. I took photos of you and a man shaking hands, I said. I'd built a case for a story that wasn't real. She looked at me in a way that wasn't pity and wasn't pride. You built the case you could survive, she said. The other one would have turned you into someone I don't know how to love. We weren't okay. We weren't broken. We were a building after inspection red tags on a few floors. Egress routes reposted, new load paths drawn. Some walls would move, some would come down. The frame would hold if we wanted it to. Weeks later, the library board voted to proceed with a revised scope, new oversight, a budget that looked like a budget and not a Swiss cheese of favors. My name stayed on the lobby plaque. I wanted to decline it and didn't. The city needed a building that wasn't guilty of the people who tried to steal it. Theo took a plea. The consultant firm rebranded 2 days later as if vowels or apology. The developer released a statement about values. Mara slept like a person who finally returned the thing she borrowed that weighed 40 pounds. Her laugh went back to the version that lives inside our house. The phone moved to the counter. The second phone disappeared like a prop on closing night. When I asked her, months later, if she would do it again Sprit Cedar, leave a key card for me to find. Let me believe in a smaller wound to spare me the big one, she said. I would have tried to write a better play. I said, I would have learned to read a different script. We were both right and wrong and married. One evening, after the ribbon cutting where the mayor mispronounced my last name and teenagers pretended not to care about books while caring with their entire bodies, we walked home. The light did the thing it does in New England when it forgives you for February. Mara stopped on the sidewalk, looked back at the library's glass and steel, and said, You built something true. So did you, I said. Mine was ugly, she said. Some truths are, I said. At home, I opened the cabinet where we keep the fancy bottle and poured exactly 1 inch into 2 heavy glasses. We aren't people who toast often, because we prefer to save that voice for funerals. But we clinked the rims and said nothing. That felt like the appropriate way to honor both the building and the mess it required. Later, in bed, her phone dinged. She didn't reach for it. I did, out of habit, and saw the notification. A calendar reminder for tomorrow morning's owning public comment. Shed set it to both of us, like a person who remembers a shared life doesn't need a ledger if you keep minutes. I slept, which is the strongest ending I can give you. If you made it here, thanks for sticking with a story where the betrayal wasn't the one, or were sold where the affair was a decoy, and the real cheating was done by a system that counts on good people looking the other way. If you want more stories with quiet turns, sharp edges, and endings that don't insult your intelligence, subscribe to End Stories. New confessions drop every day, and there's already a stack of dark, twisty ones waiting for you to watch and listen.